Tilea's Troubles, Part 132, Remnant, Insignia, an excerpt from Bonacorso Fidelibus's work, The Many Wars of the Early 20th Century, the autumn of 2404. In early autumn, the Sartosan pirates returned to their island haven, there to rest, repair, refit, and recruit. One might have thought that they would be fully sated from their plundering of Lucini, then Alcente, but their greed knew no bounds. Admiral Volker promised even greater riches to come, hoping thus to retain his command of the fleet. He happily received the news that the ransom for their prisoner, King Ferranzo III of Lucini, had been agreed and already part paid. "See now," he said to his captains, "the gold flows in even without a need to fight." Still, he was keen to ensure his captains had not the slightest reason to question his continued admiralty, and so he raised an even larger force than previously, adding the infamous ogre Captain Kroll's crew, and declared that he would raid the richest realm upon the coast of Tilea, Porto Maggiore. Yet again, he claimed the fighting would be easy, if they made suitable haste, for, just as the previous rulers they preyed upon, Lord Alessio had foolishly marched his realm's army away to fight in the war against the vampires in the far north. Lord Alessio Falcone was indeed many leagues from home, and, due to the need to transport the magical colossus, was travelling much slower than he otherwise might. As his army, accompanied by the soldiers of the VMC who had fought with him at Maragliano, were crossing the bridge of Pontrimola, he learned that Captain Mazzolini's mercenary company, the Compagnia del Sole, were close by, having fled from Campagrotta, where the Uomini Ratto's terror weapon had poisoned the land, including a great swathe of the Teta Verde forest. Apparently, the mercenaries had already met with the Riemann contingent, outstripping the Portamaggiorans and VMC on the march southwards, which, due to the difficulties presented by the need to forage for supplies in such a barren land, led to a bloody disagreement. Despite the battered nature of all these armies, even the open skirmish that had just occurred between two of them, the VMC's Colonel Van Hal, commander of the oxymoronically named Meagher Company, mentioned to Lord Alessio's right-hand man, Lord Marcus Portelli, how potentially fortunate it was, just as a new force of Uomini Ratto was threatening Tilea, that the three wounded armies now returning home, the Portamaggiorans, the Riemanns, and the army of the VMC, should meet with the remnant of the once mighty Compagnia del Sole. Should, he suggested, these four forces join, then despite the battered nature of the individual parts, they could nevertheless form by far the largest army assembled in Tilea for over a century, sufficient, surely, to nip the surgent ratmen threat in the bud. Upon hearing of this, Alessio, an astute and able commander, could not help but ponder the notion, and despite his urge to return home to guard his realm from the Sartosan raiders, made enquiries of the other commanders concerning this turn of events, even sending word to Captain Mazzolini. Yet the VMC Generalissima, Lucia La Fanciulla, regretfully answered that despite wanting very much to help, she had orders from her master to return south as soon as possible. And the Riemann commander, a stubborn dwarf still smarting from the drowning of Captain Soldatovia, and the dwarven warriors in the stinking waters of Maragliano, wanted nothing to do with the idea, saying he would now take orders only from the Riemann Archlector. Consequently, despite Captain Mazzolini's stated willingness to contribute the Compagnia del Sole to an alliance, provided nothing was done contrary to the dwarven King Jaldiog's wishes, Lord Alessio gave up on the idea and continued his journey home. Passing Rimas, he chose not to hire a fleet to travel the rest of the way by sea, perhaps because of his urge to ensure the Colossus was not lost. This was a decision he was soon to regret, for in the last weeks of autumn the Sartosans landed at Scalia, divided into two still large forces, and set about thoroughly razing both Scalia and Aclano. The commander of the garrison army of the city of Portamaggiore, Lord Nero Achau, attempted to thwart them, but had insufficient forces for the task, and was forced to retreat to the safety of the city walls, having lost several regiments, including his dwarven mercenaries and their brave commander, Lord Gersiac Irongrim. Thus it was, as winter began, the Sartosans' mount of plunder was so high that the vote regarding command of the fleet was won by Admiral Volker unanimously and enthusiastically. The realm of Portamaggiore was large and rich enough, however, that the loss of Scalia and Aclarno was not a crippling blow, and the walled city itself contained not just the substantial remnant of the garrison army, but also an unusually large standing force of militia soldiers who had refused to march out of their home to assist at Aclarno. And Lord Alessio was on his way home. And there was seasonal income and banked gold aplenty at Lord Nero's disposal. Porta Maggiore had been hurt, but only in the way a dragon might be after its tail was blooded, and it remained very dangerous. What happened next depended on how bold Volker felt, and how far away Lord Alessio was, and whether the militia would act more bravely when it came to defending the walls of their home. In the northeast, the mysterious elven denizens of Teteverde Forest spied upon the Uomini Ratto in Campagrotta, and there were reports that an elven emissary had spoken to King Jaldiog of Caracborgo, presumably to broker some sort of alliance between the two realms against the Ratmen. Then, at the end of autumn, it seemed the verminous army had left the city, disappearing into their subterranean passages. Considering all the rumours concerning the extent of these ancient underpasses and tunnels, many in Tilea became concerned. The Compagnia del Sole lodged first in Via d'Azza, where they met with the last survivors of the Brabazon mercenaries and assisted in obtaining ships for them to return home to Bretonnia. By the end of autumn, they had moved to Urbino, invited by Barone Pietro Cibo. He had isolated himself in his palazzo since returning from the great defeat of the Disciplinati di More a year previously, widely rumoured to be quite insane. Now, at last, he had emerged from his self-imprisonment to govern his realm once more. In Rimas, the citizens welcomed their army back with open arms, the Arch-Lector blessing them for all they had done, and rewarding all the officers amongst them with pensions, and the soldiers with a year's pay in advance, without demanding that they serve that year. A surprising number chose to remain in arms, and took part in the grand parade to celebrate the great victory gained over the vampires. Then they gathered in the city's Empire Quarter, what with so many of them hailing from the north, before the Taverna del Grifone Verde, there to cheer the knights parading through the city. This new knightly order, the Cavalieri Benedetti, were being received into the Church of Moor's service. Each of them was a veteran of wars at home and abroad, some having already served as Cavalieri Adobati or Cavalieri di Corredo, others having been members of knightly orders in the great Ultramontane Empire, and occasional customers of the Green Griffin. Now they had vowed to spend the rest of their days in service of Holy Moor, obeying his worldly representative, the Arch-Lector's every command. Liveried like the palace guard in the colours of Rimas, their standard bore the crossed keys to Holy Moor's garden. Each knight bore some remnant insignia of their previous order, to reflect how all mortal souls, no matter whom they serve, as long as they are sufficiently worthy, will finally come to Moor's garden. This officially sanctioned order was just one of the ways that the Arch-Lector Bernardo hoped to restore the High Church's traditional control of the city after the turmoil of both the wars and the rise of the Disciplinati di More. The latter had not vanished entirely, despite the complete annihilation of its army a year before, but His Holiness ensured that it remained within its bounds and functioned as just one of several religious orders, under strict supervision. As the Portamaggiore General Lord Alessio had proved, with a professional army of Remans, Portamaggiorans and VMC mercenaries, it was soldiers who could win wars against the undead, something the huge rabble of dedicants and fanatics had found impossible. In central Tilea, a new, uneasy peace had been achieved, or at least a tentative truce for the time being, between the antagonistic realms of Pavona and Varezzo. It was as if a moment in time had been stretched out, with each participating party willing it to continue, despite ongoing distrust and doubts of many kinds. As long as Duke Guidobaldo lay ill, his son would rule in his stead, and there were few in Tilea, even Pavona's enemies, who did not have respect for the young noble, for all that he had done attempting to defend the realm from evil. While the Uomini Ratto presented a new danger to the whole realm, Barone Iacopo, the Varezan regent, seemed glad to avoid war against the Pavonans, despite his many grievances. Meanwhile, he could enlarge his forces so that whether he faced Ratmen or Pavonans, when the time came, he would be ready. His new alliance with Ridrafa, which had been instrumental in obtaining the truce, offered hope to both realms. as did the knowledge that Lord Alessio Falcone was returning from the north, for the baroni had served in the Alliance army commanded by Alessio, and not only respected him as an able commander, but trusted him as a friend. Bouldergut's ogres had left Tilea entirely. The vampires and their rotting legions had been burned. Now it was Sartos and robbers and ratmen who presented threats, which, at least to those who knew their history, seemed somewhat less worrying, for neither were known for stability or longevity. The pirates had a habit of dispersing to the four corners of the world once they had sufficiently satisfied their lust for gold, while the Uominirato had a propensity for chaos in many forms, from backstabbing and squabbling among their commanders to an over-reliance on dubious strategies and unstable engines of war, and they were cursed with a streak of cowardice that could send them scuttling away at the first sign of possible defeat. Could it be that once these two last threats were overthrown, Tilea would enjoy a time of peace?